You know, I was wondering if you could just talk to us about just the state of human rights globally. I mean, you were talking about places you're sending Bitcoin to Palestine and Cuba, and obviously we see what's happening in Ukraine. And just, I mean, you have a real finger on the pulse of the state of what is it? What are the hot spots? And has it gotten better or worse in 10 years? And how do you even quantify that?
Yeah, it's dire. I mean, it's something that you could make an argument was improving dramatically in the 80s and 90s. We had these like waves of democracies, these dictators coming down, getting tossed out. But in the last 10 years, it's really stagnated. I mean, you've got like more repression, obviously, and Russia's gone the wrong way. China's gone the wrong way. Turkey's gone the wrong way. Venezuela went the wrong way. Many other countries have had setbacks. Thailand, Bangladesh. I mean, these are huge countries. Pakistan. So you have billions of people living in countries that are getting more oppressive. You have democracies turning back into authoritarian regimes. So it's not a great time in that sense. People even feel more at threat in democracies about what they can say and what they can do, and how they're being controlled, how their bodies are being controlled, how their speech is being controlled. People are worried, right? So I think that this is a good time for Bitcoin, because otherwise I'd be pretty I wouldn't be very optimistic about the future. It'd be pretty dark. It gives us the shield to fight back, which I think is really cool. And I think that when it comes to human rights activism, obviously I've done it for almost 15 years. Like I love it. I don't regret any of it. But I will say that some of it in the end boils down to virtue signaling. It's like you're like free Tibet on Twitter or whatever. Like, what's that really going to do? Nothing. But if you teach a Tibetan how to use Bitcoin, okay, now that's real activism. That's going to lead to a meaningful improvement in their life. That's going to give them real freedom, right? So I think that's kind of cool. Like, this is activism without virtue signaling. It's like Bitcoin education.
That's a super cool way of looking at it. You mentioned some of these governments, and a lot of them are using surveillance, monitoring things that maybe should be private, and then sometimes using AI or even restricting some of the social media platforms like in Turkey, et cetera. What do you see that we should be concerned about in those ways? I mean, we talk about even going into central bank digital currencies in China, and we hear about the 5G and the face recognition, but is this something that concerns you as technology improves, and can AI spin out of control if in the wrong hands?
Well, I think a lot of people have said something along the lines of that AI is communist and Bitcoin is kind of libertarian, right? Like, I think there's something in there, right? I think that it's very hard to make a case that any sort of big data analysis or AI is good for civil liberties. It might be good for improving the population of tuna in a particular area, or monitoring a volcano, or biomedical stuff and health. And there's a lot of really great things that AI can be used for, but not civil liberties. I mean, it's something that requires data. It requires oversight and control and penetration into people's lives. The largest AI experiments, of course, are in China, where the government has basically turned the Muslim population into a science experiment and puts them in prison camps and takes their DNA, and God knows what they're doing. I mean, they're doing organ harvesting and all kinds of stuff, and all that's powered by AI and big data analysis. So I'm very bearish on AI being good for civil liberties. You want to make a case for more kind of zero knowledge systems? Maybe. I just haven't seen the evidence of that. I just don't know that governments will be in the end interested in that. Governments don't want zero knowledge systems. Governments want full knowledge systems about their people. The US government, the Chinese government, the EU, they don't want a privacy protecting AI standard. They want full insight. Let's not forget, the same people who are leading America today, Biden, etc., they wanted a clipper chip. They wanted to be in your private conversations on the internet. And we fought them back through cypherpunk activism, right? People like Adam Back fought them back. So I don't know. I think that I would not trust them to lead us in the right direction. And even if there is some technology that exists to help AI be less intrusive, I don't know that it'll be employed. I don't know if it'll be chosen. So that's why, again, we got to seize our rights. And forget AI and um, banking the unbanked and ID for the world. I think all those things are control mechanisms. I think Bitcoin is ultimately like something that can be used to empower people. I mean, consider this: like, if ultimately what people need when they like get a bank account or get ID, they want to borrow. Like, they want to be able to borrow. This is a key thing about human nature. Like, most money is credit, right? So, and that won't change under a Bitcoin standard, in my opinion. But the cool part is, how do you borrow today? You have to like prove everything about yourself, right? Well, if you have a little bit of the world's pristine financial collateral, no one's going to care who you are. If you say, I want to borrow and I'm going to collateralize that with this amount of Bitcoin, you're as good as gold. Like, you've just given them the most important money in the world. So I think that Bitcoin itself will be like ID. Like, you won't need ID. You just, here's my sats. They'll talk for me. You know what I mean? So I think that people kind of in vulnerable areas, or just who don't have a lot of infrastructure, if they start using Bitcoin as money, and that happens in the future, I think they'll be able to borrow and get lines of credit and start businesses, without having to enter into this like freaking dystopian AI nightmarish, social engineering, world. I think that that's a possible future that I'm excited about.